assaulting the narrative, destroying their lives, unearthing the truth. I want the truth! This is The Truth with John Gordon.
Everyone, to this Happy New Year weekend edition of The Truth. I've been talking for some number of weeks about my perception that our United States federal government is rotten to its core. And I steadfastly believe that. Now, I'm not on a mission to bring anybody down or to create any havoc, but just simply to report the truth. My suspicions have been further confirmed this week by an article that appeared in the Times Network. Kuhashi Patel, I hope I pronounced her name correctly. Ms. Patel writes, and this really is shocking to me. It is shocking and it is disturbing. But she writes that Joe Biden's administration has paid Reuters news agency. Reuters is huge. They're worldwide. And they have been respected. But the Biden administration has paid Reuters and 11 other agencies over $300 million targeting Elon Musk in their stories. And that Reuters article received a Pulitzer Prize. Can you imagine this? And I've been telling you for some number of months now that I thought that the media was not fake. It's worse than fake. They are bought and paid for. They are owned. And they're owned by our federal government. We also learned that Michael Taibbi told us that Twitter was paid $3.4 million to censor or cancel people that dared speak out against a COVID vaccine or went against the government's narrative. And Cox Enterprises is said to have contracts with the Defense Department, according to one former Cox shareholder and family member. So we're just starting to scratch the surface and to dig deeper into the fake news media. And we are now learning that they're not fake, they're corrupt. They are on the government's payroll for the administration that is in office or for the deep state. And I lean towards the latter. I suspect that it is the CIA that is actually making these payments. Well, in the case of Twitter, it was the FBI. This is groundbreaking news. This is revolutionary material. This is earth-shattering news that our government is using our tax money, yours and mine, to pay news agencies to deliver the government narrative. It's the Politburo news agencies. One news agency has even been revealed to have received money from China. The more we learn, the more disappointing the news is. The more we learn, the worse we learn that it is. And folks, there's only one way to right this. There's only one way to right this ship. The only way to right the ship is to stop your subscriptions. Stop listening. Stop viewing. Because what they're telling you is propaganda. It is pure propaganda from our federal government. Now, I have read that the CIA has embedded CIA personnel in virtually every department of the federal government. I have read that the CIA has embedded CIA personnel in many newsrooms across America. And you know that Bob Woodward was a naval intelligence officer before he landed at the Washington Post and just happened to be assigned within 6 months, probably the biggest news story of the 20th century, that having been Watergate. And the more we learn, the more we know that Richard Nixon was brought down by the deep state. It was not a two-bit burglary, but it was a burglary where 4 of the 6 members of the team were CIA employees. It's worse than what we believed. And the more we learn, the more disgusting it has become. Ms. Patel writes, meanwhile, another social media user said that Biden announced a new task force to monitor and address censorship of Americans by China. More evidence that China has infected our country. They've floated spy balloons, plural, over our country. We've tracked them. Biden shot one of them down over the Atlantic after it completed the mission. We know that China has police stations in New York, Houston, and Los Angeles, and God only knows where else. We know that there are thousands of military-aged, fit Chinese men living inside the continental United States. And we also know that no one leaves China without permission of the CCP. It is later than we think. Donald Trump, I hope, is aware and is dealing with this. And I actually think he is. You know that Donald Trump this past week has been rumbling about the Panama Canal and the possibility of the United States taking it back. Why do you suppose he would want to do that? Well, I think we've learned now. Just in this last week, we've learned. Because China is operating inside of Panama. China has military guards at the Panama Canal. And the Panama government has exponentially raised the fees for ships to travel through the Panama Canal that we gave them. And it appears that they have now sold out to China. This is overt Chinese aggression, in my view, and it has got to stop. Donald Trump sees it, and he knows it, and I think he's telling China, don't even think about moving on Taiwan, because if you do, we're going to take back the Panama Canal, and your little party is over. So all of these mass deportations that Trump is promising has got to include these fit military age Chinese men that are embedded in our country, that have come here illegally without following a lawful process. They are among the first that have got to be rounded up and sent home. Then simultaneously, we'll deal with the crazy people, the insane people that Central American countries and South American countries have sent to the United States, and the people that they have gotten rid of out of their prisons that they have sent to the United States. We don't want the problem here. Joe Biden, you take them. And God only knows how much money the Biden crime family has taken. Now, why do you suppose Biden is being rumored to being considering pardons for high people in his administration? It's because Donald Trump is going to go after his political enemies. Wrong again. You see, Biden came in to this presidency on a lie, and he's leaving on a lie. He's talking about Donald Trump going after his political enemies. That is false. That is wrong. That is a lie. Donald Trump's not going after his enemies. He is going after enemies of the state. People who turn their head and look the other way while millions of illegals were crossing our southern border, bringing with them fentanyl. And God only knows what else. Certainly armaments. So it's bad. It's really bad. And then Joe Biden has paid off the media over $300 million in contracts to Reuters and 11 other agencies in the federal government has made payments to news agencies. I've said it, and I'll continue to say it. We've got to burn it all down and build it back. It's the only way I know to do it. And we're not going to, when I say burn it down, don't misconstrue my words. I'm speaking metaphorically. I am saying we have got to surgically remove the cancer that has inflicted our federal government. The people that killed John Kennedy have to be outed. The people that staged a January the 6th completely fake, false narrative around an insurrection that didn't happen have to be outed. The people that have kept the Epstein files under wraps have to be outed. The news agencies who have taken money from our federal government to maintain the company narrative, the company being the federal government narrative, have to be outed. All the people within our government who have failed to fulfill their oath of office and breached the laws of the United States and have worked against our Constitution have to be outed. Now, I don't know whether we're going to be able to try them in a court of law and convict them and sentence them, or whether they will just be outed. I think we absolutely should indict and try these people. They should have to hire lawyers and defend themselves, just as they forced Donald Trump to do for made-up charges. But Letitia James, Alvin Bragg, Fonnie Willis, Jack Smith, lawyer up, baby. It's your turn in the barrel next. And will Joe Biden issue midnight pardons for those people? I suspect and predict that he will, along with Mayorkas, Attorney General Garland, Jim Biden, his brother, the members of the January 6th commission. Nancy Pelosi appointed them. She'll be on the list along with Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger, Adam Schiff, Benny Thompson, and all the other people who have drugged this country through hell by lying and creating fictitious accounts. And we haven't even talked about the 300 people that have rotted away in prison for 3 years as a consequence. And they just say, oh, it's just collateral damage because we've got to stop Trump. They think it's a game. It's not a game. You're playing with our country's future. You're desecrating the Constitution and the laws of this country that you swore an oath to uphold. And I'm sick of it. And the American people are sick of it. And they let you know that they're sick of it on November the 5th, 2024. And we are not going to stop. We have only begun to fight. We are not letting our foot off the pedal. And to all of our listeners, all across the John Fredericks Media Network and the CDM Press, 13 digital platforms across the World Wide Web, and our listeners who watch us on social media each week. Those are small numbers, but they're growing rapidly. By the way, if you listen to us on John Fredericks, or if you listen to us on the CDM, on CD Media Press, please take a moment and go to Getter, Rumble, and YouTube and X. Subscribe to our channels. Like us if you do. Help us grow. We need you. We're depending on you. But we come to you on John Fredericks in Atlanta, Memphis, Nashville, Richmond, Norfolk, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, and Morgantown, West Virginia every Saturday from noon to 2. And we're rebroadcast on John Fredericks on Sundays from 1 to 3. Sometimes we may be preempted in your local market for football, but that's the exception, not the rule. So if you get football instead of the truth, you can go get the John Fredericks app for a different city, like Atlanta, for instance. And unless they're playing Alabama football, you can listen to us every Saturday from noon to 2. All right. So we've got to fix this. Donald Trump's got to fix it, but he can't do it alone. You and I have got to stand with him. We've got to keep harping about these egregious behaviors to our friends, relatives, fellow parishioners, anybody who will listen. Don't be afraid. You've got to be a warrior. It takes courage. Some people are going to look at you like you're wide-eyed conspiratorialist. Don't let them intimidate you. Now, today we're going to play you some interviews from people that have been kind enough to invite me to come on their program. Jason Bermas, we're going to talk about the Butler and West Palm Beach assassination attempts against Donald Trump. We're also going to talk to Todd Wood today about the same subject. And then John Ritchie is another radio host who was kind to invite me on. And then we're going to have a very good interview. I want you to stay tuned for this one with Michael Lepps. Michael has a charity, and they have raised hundreds of thousands of dollars to provide protective gear for police officers across the nation who lack bulletproof vests and similar protective gear. He has done a phenomenal patriotic job of protecting our men and women in blue. But he has special insights, especially about the transgressions at our southern border and the illegal importation of fentanyl, not to mention the abuses of child trafficking and the sexualization of children. It is very hard to listen to. And as you will hear in the interview, I told Michael he, in less than 2 or 3 minutes, led me through the 3 stages of grief as I was initially in denial. Not really, but I can't say that I've focused on child trafficking and the fentanyl issue. We've talked a lot about it, but I haven't gotten deep down in the weeds because, for one thing, it's just so damn painful to look at it. But folks, we have got to be willing to look at it. And we've got to get into the details on it. And then, as I said to Michael, you've given me a tremendous lump in my throat as I think about the abuses against 300,000 missing children. Michael puts the number at 500,000. So we go from denial to grief to anger. And that's where I am right now. I think the worst crime that you can commit is against a defenseless, harmless child. It is an unforgivable act. And folks, it is happening on our watch. And my role is to do the research, get informed guests on that are able to talk about it and to continue to share it with you. So stay tuned to the rest of the program. This is the John Fredericks Radio Network. We also are coming to you on CDM Press on 13 digital platforms around the country. We also come to you on Getter, Rumble, YouTube, and X. We're going to tell you some more of the truth today, and here's our next segment. I want you to know how grateful I am to each one of our listeners and viewers of our live stream. We really don't take this airtime for granted. It is such an honor and a privilege to be able to come to you each week with our insights into the news of the day. As I'm fond of saying, we watch the news so you don't have to. We also would like to encourage our radio listeners to go to rumble.com, youtube.com, and getter.com, search for John Gordon Truth, and subscribe to our channel. That little act of kindness on your part would go so far because it would help us expand our reach. And for a limited time only, if you will subscribe to our channel and then email me at johngordontruth@gmail.com, we will put you in a raffle for this once-in-a-lifetime Trump hat signed by none other than Rudy Giuliani.
Wow.
And that's the truth. And thank you for your consideration. Hello, Todd.
Hey.
Nice to see
Hello,
you both.
my friend. Good to see you. Thanks for coming
Merry
on.
Christmas to you too. It's good to have you on, John. Thanks for coming on with us.
My pleasure.
Hey, Todd, I'll go ahead and let you lead.
Yeah, so John, I was listening to your show, and I do this all the time because I learn a lot, first of all. But
Thank
you're
you.
very up on the assassinations, and not just the Kennedy, but the Trump assassination. I haven't heard someone dig down into the rabbit holes as much as you have. Could you give us an overview of what your thoughts are on where we are on that? Is an investigation going to happen? What do you know that may not be out there in the press?
Well, first of all, thank you for your recognition. I am determined not to let Butler fade from view, at least for our listeners. We continue to talk about it virtually every week. It is beyond disturbing to me that a candidate for president of the United States have been an attempted assassination, and it's just like faded into the woodwork, swept under the rug. Yet when I look at what happened in Dallas on November 22nd, 1963, I see remarkable similarities to Butler, Pennsylvania, and to some extent West Palm Beach a month later. And it can't happen. It cannot be allowed to go unnoticed and unresolved. And I just hope Kash Patel will do his job. I think he will. And make that front and center. The people that planned and orchestrated this need to be exposed, and they need to be punished for what they attempted to do.
Yeah. You know, what's interesting is how much of this, and this administration's been a lot like this, John, in that the lack of transparency and information that comes out on these things, how much of this is just like you said, swept under the rug, how much of it's covered up, how much of it's cleaned up. If this had been any other case, we'd have been of significance in any other administration, we'd have been kept up with what was going on here. But in this particular case, we're seeing where, I mean, the body was already, cremated. The scene was cleaned up by people who wouldn't probably normally clean up a scene. Everything was just kind of cut off really quickly. And it's like you said, there's no follow-up to this.
They destroyed evidence, and destroying evidence is a felony when you're doing it to cover up a crime. And it shocks my conscience. 2 hours after allegedly Crooks was killed by the counter sniper, you have some police officer, agent, I don't know who it was, up on top of the building, hosing off the building. It is a blatant attempt to dispose of his DNA. So I'll tell you what my suspicion is, if you'd like to hear it.
Yeah, please.
Go ahead.
There's a guy named Maxwell Urich who drove a white van to Butler, Pennsylvania from Mesa, Arizona. His father owns a munitions company in Mesa called Urich Ammunitions. And Maxwell Urich fought in the Ukraine. He had alleged ties to the CIA. He also showed up in Portland, Atlanta, D.C., other places during the 2020 riots. And he is also alleged to have known Ralph, the alleged assassin in West Palm Beach. I mean, this has got deep state written all over it. Well, so what happens? Maxwell Urich's white van is shown on national television being towed away from the Butler venue moments after the assassination attempt. The official word was that it contained explosives. Maxwell Urich was identified as a person of interest. So you look at pictures of the body on top of the AGR building, and a couple of things are very prominent. One, that individual had a tattoo on his forearm. Now, it could have just been dirt, but it looks like a tattoo. Maxwell Urich had a tattoo on his forearm. Then Maxwell Urich also had those disgusting gauges in his ear, in both ears, and at some point he removed them. The body on top of the AGR building, I've seen pictures that are zoomed in, and the body has a scar along the earlobe. Well, Thomas Matthew Crooks never had a pierced ear, and did not have a scar on his earlobe. So there is a suspicion that the shooter was actually maybe Maxwell Urich. Adding further suspicion, Maxwell Urich's parents filed a missing persons report on him on July the 14th, the day after Butler. He has not, to my knowledge, been seen or heard of since.
So
and
what
then, of
happened to
course,
Crooks?
we don't know. I don't know. And it's just all so very suspicious and more questions than answers. And then you watch Director Cheadle go before the House Oversight Committee, and she is evasive, pivoting. It just brought no meaningful information to the committee. She resigns the next day. And then we got Ron Rutrow, who is an embarrassment. I've been a political junkie my entire life. I have never seen a spectacle like I saw when he came before the Assassination Oversight Committee.
That was pretty embarrassing.
Engaged in a shouting match with a sitting member of Congress. It was inexcusable.
No, I agree. And the idea, just the sheer, I mean, the gall of this guy to go into that House floor like that and talk down to a sitting member of Congress like that, his own oversight committee, and talk down to him like that is just, I mean, it's totally unacceptable, very inappropriate. Never seen anything.
We're talking
like
about
it.
Butler, Pennsylvania, and he goes on a tirade about how he defended the country in the aftermath of 9/11. I mean, and the point was, I'm untouchable. You can't question me because I fought for our country after 9/11. Well, there are a lot of people that have fought for our country, and they're not untouchable.
It's the Dan Crenshaw excuse.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. Dan Crenshaw. Exactly. You know what always amazes me about this, John, is the arrogance of these people. They don't succumb to their oversight. They don't believe they should have any. They don't believe that they should have to explain anything to anybody, or especially to the people of this country, because that's what your oversight is. Your oversight is our window into what you're doing. And what you're trying to do is keep us out of it. What interests me about what you're talking about here with the with what happened in Butler with the assassination attempt is that, the number of spaces here that have questions, whether it's the missing personnel like you're talking about, whether it's the scene itself and having no forensics to be able to go back. They just released the other day that it took this counter sniper multiple shots to take this guy out. They're admitting to this now.
And he waited until he took him out, like 8 rounds off, right? Something like that.
No, it's anybody with a half a brain can look at it and tell that it was a setup. That's my paradigm, and I don't consider myself to be some kind of fringe lunatic. I just really want the truth, and I want our president to be protected, and I want our nation's foundational values to be protected. We can't go around killing our political opponents, or else we devolve to nothing more than a banana republic. And unfortunately, that's what happens when you seat an illegitimate president and you allow the baggage that comes with him to go into the White House. The whole thing is repulsive and disgusting to me. I call it the Biden reign of terror. They're a crime family, and they've got cocaine in the White House. They've got a son of the president who I have a lot of pity and empathy for. And people say, what are you talking about? Well, I'll tell you what I'm talking about. he has no father. His role model is a crime figure who has converted him and trained him to be the bagman and to accept $3 million from the mayor of Moscow, a Porsche, diamonds, and money from a Russian oligarch, $800,000 in a year from Burisma, a flagrantly corrupt company in the Ukraine that we're now sending hundreds of billions of dollars to. Are we out of our mind? And we're housing illegal immigrants in the Roosevelt Hotel right across the street from Grand Central Station. I have visited the Roosevelt Hotel. I've talked to the immigrants there. I've talked to business owners surrounding the Roosevelt Hotel. And I have walked from there back to my hotel 4 blocks away and past 4 homeless people on the street in New York who lack shelter, food, clothing, yet we're spending money on an Obama phone and a motor scooter to people from Venezuela and Guatemala and Mexico who have come here illegally. It just boggles your mind. And Trump has assembled a group of warriors, and I think that they are committed. I think they've got the guts to go in and clean it up. We have to have a cleansing of our federal government, which I think is rotten to the core.
Yeah.
Over 93% of federal workers don't show up for work every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you think they're working from home? I don't think so. I think they're watching you on TV right now. I hope.
John, you
maybe I don't hope. I don't know.
Yeah.
You ran for attorney general, and obviously, let's switch to Georgia for a second. What's going on in the Peach State that you see as far as are we moving in the right direction, or do you even want to talk about that at this point?
I'm happy to talk about anything. Are we moving in the right direction? I think that we have taken baby steps in the right direction, but my instincts aren't comfortable with what the dynamics in Georgia. We can start with Kemp. I don't trust him. I used to. Not only did I used to really like him, but he has proven untrustworthy to me. And the way that Kelly Loeffler was appointed to the U.S. Senate over Doug Collins, Kelly's, she used to be a friend of mine. She's probably not a friend of mine any longer because I call it as I see it, but she was no more qualified to be in the United States Senate than
Barack Obama.
My dog Sterling. I mean, she's a lovely lady. She's well-spoken. She's well-educated. She was a horrible candidate. And whoever was managing her got her to the point where she was so robotic, and they dressed her in pigtails and these polka-dotted shirts, portraying her as a farm girl from the Midwest, which she was, but she no longer is. And when Trump went to the factory, he didn't put on bib overhauls. He wore his suit and was who he really is. They did not portray Kelly to be the person that I know her to be. And I thought that was a severe disservice to her. But Doug Collins, I think, is a wonderful guy and was a Trump loyalist. He is a lawyer. He is very devout. And there were a number of other people that filled out that form to be considered for an appointment to the United States Senate. Kemp goes and appoints somebody completely out of left field with no real background qualifying her. And then, and I'm not, well, I don't know. I'm just going to say it. His net worth went from -$3 million to +$6 million in 3 years as governor of Georgia, making $250,000 a year. I'm sorry. I smell a rat. I'm not comfortable with that. I'm not down with that. Then you've got Raffensperger, who I wouldn't trust I wouldn't trust him to carry a Big Mac from McDonald's to my front door. And Chris Do Nothing Carr, I think the whole thing is just icky. Yeah. It just makes my skin crawl. And Josh McCoon masquerading to be an anti-Kemper, yet Kemp is his boss.
It's his daddy. Yeah.
And then Kemp is made cozy with Trump, and I don't know what deal they made. I expect Kemp to run for the United States Senate, and he'll probably get elected, but that doesn't mean that I have to go kowtow and not tell people what I believe is the truth. Or I don't know that to be truth. A lot of what I said, I suspect it, and it doesn't pass a smell test. That's what I'm really saying.
So what are your plans in the near future? I mean, the show is doing extremely well. You're all over the U.S. I mean, what are your plans with the show and personally?
What is the saying? Man's plans or God's folly. It's his humor. I don't really have any plans right now other than to finish the house that I'm building, continue to be an observer and reporter and writer, and enjoy my time with my wife and family. I've never really gone and looked for any of the offices I've run for. They've kind of come to me, and they came to me much too late each time. If I do run for office again, I will not procrastinate and put it off. But I'm just watching the moon and the stars, and if God speaks to me and says you should do this, then I'll listen and I'll follow God's commandment. But right now, I'm not really seeing a path forward politically for me. If it presents itself, I would love to serve my country. I'd love to make a difference. But right now, I'm just staying in my lane and enjoying life.
Good. Hey, John, how do people catch your show?
You can watch CD Media, and every Saturday from noon to 2 we're on. We're also on the John Fredericks Radio Network in Memphis, Atlanta, Richmond, Norfolk, Pennsylvania, and Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, and Morgantown, West Virginia. And we're also on Rumble, Getter, and YouTube Live. So come there and subscribe to us if you would. It would mean a lot. It would allow us to have a greater reach and even get better guests. So come subscribe to us. It doesn't cost anything. Take you about a minute to do it.
We're happy to be working with you and bringing high quality content and personalities to CDM. So we appreciate that.
The Truth with John Gordon.
I woke up on top of the world this morning.
We break down today's political landscape and feature interviews with key guests.
It doesn't matter if they call you a or a
to uncover the real story behind current events in the United States.
Of course, saw a rifle pointing through a fence with a chain link. Okay, so
you're a good man. I just want to give you a compliment because you have courage to stay with the truth.
I hate injustice.
This is great fun. I like you and your ideas. So let's do some more of this.
Welcome to Making Sense of the Madness. We've got a great show lined up for you today. We've got John Gordon to talk about the assassination attempts on Trump, something that has kind of fallen by the wayside, not just in the mainstream, but also the alternative media. And then we got Brian Reisinger to talk about tariffs, but also pesticides and this incoming Trump 2.0 administration. You're not going to want to miss it. Buckle up and get ready to make sense of the madness. And we are back with the host of The Truth with John Gordon. John, before we get into, really I want to talk about both assassination attempts, but we've got this new information that supposedly the Secret Service agent taking shots at Ruth was only 5 feet away, much different from the initial deal where they were telling us something different. What is your background? Tell us about the show, and why are you concerned with what they are telling us about the assassination attempts?
Well, that's a real loaded question. I have been a political observer since I was 10 years old and put on my first bumper sticker for Richard Nixon. I've been involved in the Georgia Republican Party for the last 30 years. I was chairman of the Georgia Republican Foundation. I've been a candidate twice, once for the state Senate, once for the Attorney General of Georgia in 2022 with President Trump's endorsement. So I watch this stuff. I pay attention. And the assassination attempt in Pennsylvania is particularly troubling to me. We have many more questions than we do answers. And I've also been an academician studying the Kennedy assassination since I was home from the 4th grade on November 22nd in 1963 with a bad case of the flu. I remember vividly waking up at about 12:30 in the afternoon and consciously thinking, John, if you don't get up and get out of bed, you're never going to get well. So I knew my mom watched As the World Turns every day at 1 o'clock, and I made my way downstairs to the family TV. And sure enough, there she was. And she said, "Oh, John, come sit next to me." And so that was not unusual for my mom. She was a very loving, nurturing person. But even the sound of her voice as a 10-year-old, I noticed something foreboding. And so I sat next to her on the sofa and I said, "Mom, is everything okay?" And she said, "Well, no." She said, "The president has been shot." And I could not really interpret the words. I couldn't understand what she was trying to tell me. Long story made short, I sat there for the next 4 days with my mom and dad. We watched the events unfold. My dad and I watched Oswald killed on national television in real time. And I have studied that assassination for the last 65 years, thinking that I was going to have to die and go to heaven before I would ever get the real answers. And then I read a series of books, The Men Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ by Roger Stone, The Devil's Chessboard by David Talbot, The Unspeakable by Douglas, The Rush to Judgment, which is a kind of a classic in the Kennedy folklore, by Mark Lane, and a light bulb went off. It's been in front of us the whole time. Our own government killed Kennedy. Allen Dulles and the CIA orchestrated it from his townhouse in Georgetown after having been fired by Kennedy as head of the CIA. He continued as head of the CIA without the title. They pulled off this murder. They got away with it. And the similarities in Butler are striking. The perimeter was artificially constrained. If you look at the AGR building, you look at the whole perimeter as a pie, the AGR building was excluded from protection. I mean, it's as clear as the nose on your face. The people who were in the AGR building, counter snipers, who were actually sheriff's deputies, left their post just 2 or 3 minutes before Crooks became visible on the roof. 50 eyewitnesses saw Crooks on the roof, but the Secret Service missed it until he was in a sniper's prone position. And then the counter snipers adjacent to the president, who were charged with watching the AGR building, had their guns trained on Crooks. They had him in his sights, but failed to pull their trigger until they allowed him to get off 8 rounds of ammunition.
Well, let's talk about that.
So I'm not buying any of it. I'm not buying any of it. There's so much more to talk about.
I don't think he got off 8 rounds of ammunition. I think it's pretty clear. I mean, if you've read the internal report, and the only media outlet that I've seen report on it is that second volley that you hear after those initial 4 shots is actually that police officer that stuck his head up and then fired. And he's an ex-National Guardsman. He says he hit him. You don't believe that?
No, I do. I believe everything that you said, except it is unquestioned that Crooks got off 8 rounds of ammunition. There was a policeman that went up on the roof initially, and he counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I mean, you can go watch the video. And then 30 minutes later, another cop comes up on the roof, and he says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, and 1, 2, 3. There are 5 over here, and then 3 over there. Now, you could explain that by Crooks changing his position or cocking the gun in a different way so the shells eject in a different to a different location. But there are 8 cartridges on the roof. A total of 12 shots were fired altogether. And I agree with you. There was a heroic cop that did take 1 shot at Crooks. I've not heard that it hit Crooks. Well,
but he says he disarmed him. He says it hit the gun barrel.
Yeah, you're right. You are correct about that. Yes, hit the gun barrel and may have hit Crooks in the shoulder. But
so to me, that means he's not firing after he gets shot like that. And the kill shot seems to be 5-6 seconds after any bullets are going off, and that's obviously from the sniper finally after the fact. I feel like they didn't want this guy talking after the fact.
That's the one. That's what I was talking about. I did forget about the lone cop acting on his own. But the counter snipers with the headphones and the binoculars and the long range scopes, that's the one I'm talking about. Just like you, they waited until the shooter had failed his mission and then took him out, silenced him. Now there is a fair amount of evidence that makes you question whether Thomas Matthew Crooks was the alleged assassin, would-be assassin. There was a guy named Maxwell Urich who drove a van from Mesa, Arizona to Butler, Pennsylvania. That van is titled to Urich Ammunitions, and Maxwell Urich's father owns that company. And there are also indications that that company has traded arms with people in third world countries, perhaps with the encouragement or work with the CIA. Maxwell Urich was in Portland, he was in Atlanta, he was in DC with the riots of 2020, and the van was seen on national television being impounded and towed away from the venue moments after the assassination attempt. The story we're told was that it contained explosives. The day after the assassination attempt, Maxwell Urich's parents filed a missing persons report on him. To my knowledge, he has not been seen or heard of since. Another additional data point, he fought in the Ukraine and is believed to have known Roth, the assassination suspect, alleged assassin, would-be assassin in West Palm Beach. So the further down the rabbit hole you get, the more unseemly it becomes and the more questions that are raised.
Now, as I understand it, you're talking about the van that apparently dogs detected explosives or something with. It gets impounded.
Yeah.
And then when they went back to Crooks's home, they also stated that they found explosives, I believe, in his closet. Again, we've gotten so little details about everything, what types of explosives they were, whether they matched with the van, what happened to the van, as you stated, and really also on Crooks himself. Now, correct. I will say this, obviously, a lot of people pointed to that Black Rock video. If you look at the kid and his family, he's living there with his parents as a young adult. His job is in a facility that takes care of mentally ill and really elderly injured people. So in other words, he's around a lot of doctors and I would say medications all the time. I believe both of his parents are behavioral psychologists. I think there is, it's 100% this kid is heavily medicated on something. Now, that's something no one has really talked about. Now, I think that's one of the smaller aspects. Obviously, it's alarming that we don't have any social media posts whatsoever from somebody in their early 20s, especially somebody that probably, once again, doesn't have a lot of friends in person. Most people in that situation, especially in today's day and age, and I would argue the last decade plus, find a group online, and yet we have no evidence of that. There's talk of the encrypted communications possibly that this kid was making. There's also the evidence that the FBI may have been in communication with him prior to this. So what are your thoughts on all of those subjects?
Well, I think the most disturbing thing to me is that Crooks visited the shooting range for a month or two before the assassination attempt, and someone signed in with him every time, and that someone's name was redacted from the records in an open records request. So we'd like to know who that was. There are also breadcrumbs that have been left from someone's cell phone that visited Crooks's home, I think 5 times maybe, and those breadcrumbs trace right back to, what's the name of the location in Washington, D.C., where there are a lot of government offices. It's right on the tip of my tongue.
Langley?
No. It's like King of Prussia or Lenox Square. It's a live, work, play community right in the center of D.C. The cell phone breadcrumbs show that someone from Washington visited Crooks in his home at least 4, if not 5 times in the month or two leading up to July 13th. A Galaxy place, that's it. I'm pretty sure. And that's a known office building that houses the Secret Service, the FBI, ATF, offices in D.C. So there's not a direct linkage. I mean, it doesn't show that they went to a specific office. The trail kind of goes cold once you get in the office complex. But it certainly is more than a lot of smoke that needs to be unraveled. And, you know, the way Cheadle behaved in that congressional hearing and the way Ron Rutrow behaved in the congressional hearing just makes me, every tentacle of my being, all my instincts are telling me something's not right. They're covering up, they're diffusing, they're pivoting, they're dodging and weaving. Just give us the damn truth and let the chips fall where they may. But I think they're not going to give us the truth because it points straight back to them or the CIA or some alphabet agency. Look, the deep state did everything they could to unseat Trump. It started the day of his inauguration in 2016. They started a coup to try and get him out as president. 2 fake and phony impeachments, 4 criminal prosecutions based on nothingness. All of them have largely fallen apart. Tucker Carlson said there's nothing left that they can try against Trump except assassination. Within a month, 2 days before the RNC, we're to believe this lone gunman crazed kid got up on the roof undetected. They may as well have hung us a neon sign that said, "Open, come on in, guns welcome." I mean, that's the way I interpret it.
I mean, he was walking around with a rangefinder as well. And the other, aspect on that, other than the media and how they reacted in real time and now after the fact, which is just as incriminating to me, is not only is he walking around with a rangefinder, but there's got to be dozens, if not hundreds of more videos out there from people that were taken. What have we seen? Like 10? Maybe 10? Like out of everything? This is 2024. This was a Trump rally. Yeah. There were people screaming. If anybody thinks that it's like the one video of them screaming, no, they've got video of so much more throughout the day. Just from the security surveillance alone, I can only imagine what they got on the ground after the fact. We have to realize people did die here. You had that individual, taken out of the bleachers, dead. You saw some of the stray bullets hit that arm in the water shootout, etc. The fact that we don't have videos everywhere is extremely troubling. Number 2, the way the media first said it, they weren't even admitting to an assassination attempt. No media outlet whatsoever has done any investigative reporting on Crooks whatsoever. If that guy takes a pot shot at Joe Biden or any other president previously, he's on the cover of magazines. Think about just the Boston bombers. You know what I mean? There's none of that. You didn't see Crooks's face anywhere. Very quickly, it just had all the hallmarks of, we don't want you to remember this. We don't want you to look into this. And quite frankly, we're not going to look into it. We're going to act like it didn't even happen. And then you have the Ruth thing happen, what? Within the next month.
1 month, almost 1 month and the day afterwards.
Which is completely insane. And you've got a guy who is living in Hawaii, has a home somewhere else. Hawaii's pretty damn expensive, is flying overseas, is in videos promoting the Ukraine-Russia war, and has his hair dyed yellow and blue. You dig a little deeper, this guy had a charge where he opened fire on police officers in New York City, I think all the way back in 2003, and somehow didn't get jail time then. Think about that for a second, folks. That's post 9/11. Now he's doing overseas, it seems, operative work for intelligence agencies. Weird. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back. We are with John Gordon. You can check him out on his podcast, The Truth with John Gordon. You can check him out over at X and on Rumble and beyond. We're going to come back. We're going to discuss Ruth, and much more. It's making sense of the madness. And we are back. All right, let's get into this second deal. Now, I guess the biggest piece of evidence that we got from law enforcement after the fact is like the picture, right? Of the backpack, of the gun. Okay. Now, I remember hearing this in the very beginning, being like, how in the world are they letting anybody get this close to this guy after the fact? And then you find out that it was really local law enforcement that got involved first, from an eyewitness on the ground on the highway watching this lunatic. And originally, when it's reported, now for me, it felt like the first time around, they wanted to do it on television. They wanted this to be a TV moment. Hey, another warning, another shock moment that's going to be embedded in history that no one's going to forget. There's some people, I mean, that don't even know it happened at this point. Like, oh yeah, that's right, he did get shot. Like, think about that. It's crazy. Now, the second time around, I think they just want him gone. They don't care. Now, allegedly, Trump, I think, is golfing, and I think MSNBC is with him. So maybe they would have caught it, or maybe something after the fact. Who knows? Maybe it would be Zapruder 2.0 if that happens, but certainly not the same deal. By the grace of whatever, it doesn't happen again. Somebody sees the rifle head poking through. But, you know, as I understand it now, the Secret Service being 5 feet away from the barrel and not being able to subdue this guy, I mean, or eliminate him, et cetera, is extremely troubling. And the fact that we haven't heard anything about this guy after the fact, or a trial, or connections whatsoever, just as alarming. I'm going to let you take it from here.
Well, I agree with you. And, you know, I was sitting in my office right here on, it was August the 14th. Is that the date? I think it was the 14th. I can look and see real quick. But anyway, it was a Sunday afternoon. And I was working, watching football, and a news flash comes on. And I learned that there was a second attempt on President Trump's life. I'm 3 miles from Trump International Golf Course. My home is right across the Intercoastal Waterway. My producer and I, we jump in the car and we drive to Trump International Golf Course. And I spent the next 3 hours. We attended the press conference with the sheriff and the state attorney and the FBI and the Secret Service. And they said they were being totally transparent and forthcoming. I didn't learn anything from it other than basically what you just said, that they saw the rifle barrel poking through the fence. The Secret Service agent gave fire. You're the second person who's told me this week that Secret Service agent was within 5 feet. I had not understood that. I was of the impression that he was yards away from the shooter and that he just missed him. I don't know whether that's true or not. The fact of the matter is, we don't know. We don't know who the Secret Service agent was. They have not told us who the citizen on the street was that saw Ralph running for his car. I've spent probably 10 or 12 hours out there talking to everybody around the location that I could talk to, trying to find who the citizen was. And I have been unable to determine who it is, so we could maybe get some information. But the thing that was unmistakable to me, I know nothing about protecting high value assets, okay? That is a profession and a specialty in and of itself. But what I do know is that when I see Trump's motorcade coming and going, there are no less than 50 motorcycle cops from Palm Beach County, the sheriff's office, Palm Beach Police, West Palm Beach Police, Broward County, the State Patrol. I mean, it is a spectacle, and that doesn't even start to count the number of cars and agents and counter snipers that are in vehicles driving in the motorcade. And I've spent 3 hours walking around there. And when I left, the thing that was unmistakable to me is that with 3 guys, you could have secured the entire perimeter on the southeast corner of Trump, which was where that sniper positioned himself. One guy on the west corner, a cop, one cop on the southeast corner, and one on the northeast corner, you've got the entirety of Trump International that is exposed to the public covered. You could have had binoculars. You could have covered this whole street on Congress. Same on Summit. You could have seen the entirety of it. Ralph would never have been able to have gained access undetected. To me, again, it is more than an omission. It is an intentional dereliction of duty at best, and an invitation to somebody to come and take a shot at the president at worst. My instincts are leading me to the latter conclusion. It reeks of deep state. Ralph, $36,000 a year is what he claims that he made. And as you said, Jason, he's traveling the globe. He's flying from Hawaii to the Ukraine, back to West Palm Beach, getting around down here and staying somewhere.
Hawaii alone,
Yes.
again, for people that don't get it, should raise super a lot. If you're not pulling six figures, or you're not like fourth generation living there, it's not happening. And six figures, you're struggling.
Yes.
In Hawaii, everybody.
But you touched on the other really important thing that I want to also touch on before we run out of time. And that is, why are we not talking about it? Why are we not, meaning the media? You are, Jason. I am. I have a small megaphone. We're on the John Fredericks Radio Network every Saturday from 12 to 2 in Memphis, Atlanta, Richmond, Norfolk, Nashville, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, and Morgantown, West Virginia. I hope your listeners will come and join us there. I make an intentional point of talking about it every Saturday, if just for a minute or two, because we cannot forget that. Because if we do, we allow them to do what they're counting on, and that is it being swept under the rug. Vivek Ramaswamy, Elon Musk, Pam Bondi, and Kash Patel cannot allow this to be swept under the rug, because if they do, they leave Trump exposed. And let me tell you, those folks are coming after the deep state. Enough is enough. We don't want any more Butlers or West Palm Beaches. We want the Epstein files. We want all the secrets to come out, including, and I'll wrap this up on this point, the drones. I've been a pilot since I was 15. I've flown an airplane for 65 years. I have visited the Atlanta Center, Radar Control Center, just south of Hartsfield. I've been to the Atlanta arrival and departure, the Atlanta TRACON, they call it, in Peachtree City, Georgia. I know what their radar abilities are. I live in that system. I just flew from West Palm Beach to Los Angeles and back for Thanksgiving. I have lived in that system for 65 years. I know the capabilities. I know how they do it. There is zero, listen to me, zero chance that our government does not know where the drones have taken off from, where they have gone on their mission, and where they have gone and landed at the conclusion of the mission.
Well,
they could answer that in a nanosecond. Why?
That's the problem, though, isn't it, John? Because this
No,
is
that's-
happening right now. They're lying to our face.
Totally.
That's not a great sign. Obviously.
But think about it.
With military industrial complex drones, yes, they have third-party corporate subsidiaries that are running the tests in conjunction with the military for plausible deniability.
Bingo.
You're right. It's absurd.
But
they're
you have to
lying
ask
our face
yourself
right
why.
now. Well, there's a lot of why I think they're trying to acclimate us to the fact that these are going to be used. I think that they're also trying to spook and hype a possible big event. Look, we haven't even sworn this guy in.
Well, I have a
think
theory,
he's
if I may.
perfect. He's the best thing we got.
100%.
You talk about the Epstein files. Look, man, we need JFK, RFK, MLK, Malcolm X, John Lennon, MK Ultra, every subsidiary, 9/11, the real Iran-Contra files. We need to put it all out there
100%.
and just say, hey, this is the reality. Now we need to reshape what is our intel community because we want to be a constitutional republic again. This has been an executive within an executive that is out of control and has been unaccountable now for decades.
You and I are perfectly aligned. But let me tell you what my theory is on why the drone thing has come onto the national forefront and why we're not getting the answers. What are we not talking about now that we should be talking about, but we're not, because we're talking about drones over New Jersey and nobody knows the answer when they obviously they know the answer. What are we not talking about? We are not talking about Hunter Biden's pardon, and we're not talking about the 1,500 people whose sentences were just commuted. It's probably the biggest story of Biden's presidency because he has allowed people that should not have their sentences commuted out, and the whole room is being consumed by these drones. It is a smokescreen. The media has fallen for it. The people are falling for it. We need to get the focus back on the dastardly deeds of Joe Biden and this corrupt, evil, rotten to the core administration. We've got 30 more days to go before we can get rid of it. Can we hold on that long? I hope so.
We'll see. Well, let me just end with this. We've also gone through 4+ years of a dementia patient clearly being installed and running nothing. And the acceptance of the general public. I mean, you couldn't look a real politically astute Democrat in the eye, in the face, and say, you really think Joe Biden's running the country? Even in 2020 when they installed him. At 3-0, everybody knew.
It's a puppet.
Okay? So we've had puppets before. No doubt about it. I look at the second Bush administration, even the Obama administration. Yeah, smart guys, but smarter guys around them, not necessarily calling the shots. Trump is the first guy in my generation that actually wanted to be the president, right? Again, imperfect, but look at what they did to him. John, it has been a pleasure. You can go follow him at John Gordon Truth on X, or you can go check him out on The Truth with John Gordon show over on Rumble.
It's my pleasure now to welcome Michael Letts, the founder and CEO of Invest USA, to The Truth this afternoon, a national grassroots nonprofit that has helped hundreds of communities by providing thousands of bulletproof vests to law officers. Michael Letts, welcome to The Truth.
Always a privilege to be with you, John. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I hope you had a wonderful Christmas.
I did. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you. And
Thank you.
I want to start by asking you if you share my opinion that this federal government is absolutely rotten to its core.
I think it's the worst federal government agency we've ever had in history. You have to give a little credit to where it's due. Obama pretty much laid out some of the groundwork, but this administration has far exceeded what Obama put in place.
Well, don't you think this is Obama's third administration, really?
It is, no question. Everybody asks me that question, and I know for a fact it's Joe's not calling the shots. I mean, staff is, and staff are being directed by Obama.
That's my belief, and the word is that Biden doesn't go to work until 10 in the morning and he knocks off at 2 in the afternoon. I don't think you can run a country of 300 million people and a $6 trillion budget and give it 4 or 6 hours a day. I just think that is an unrealistic expectation. So I've got several things. I've got several things I want to talk to you about. Let's start with Hunter Biden's pardon. What's your take?
Well, we all knew it was coming. We knew Joe was lying the minute he said he would not pardon him. But here's what's interesting. He's taken that opportunity. First of all, he squandered it. A great opportunity. If he wanted to go down that route, which he should have never done, because quite frankly, it opens up a can of worms. But you bring in the father issue. If he's going to move with a pardon, why doesn't he move with a pardon to bring the country unified together? Why doesn't he move to pardon all the J6ers? Why doesn't he move to pardon, for that matter, pardon Trump? I mean, not he's going to need it, but pardon Trump. He could have used it to do something to his promise during the campaign. You remember when he ran in 2020, he was going to be a unifier. He was going to bring this country together. And he did the exact opposite. He divided the country worse than it's ever been divided. Really even worse than when Obama was there. Well, he had a great chance and he squandered.
Well, I love your thought, and I think you're exactly right that would have been a tremendous way to have gone about it, and it probably would have endeared him to a good number of the American people and allowed them to be more accepting of the pardon of Hunter Biden. But there's one problem with your analysis, in my view. you infer that there is competence within the Biden White House. And I don't believe that they have the ability to reason and come up with a plan like that could actually have a beneficial effect on the country. So what about the commutations? 1,500 people, including rapists and murderers, and 2 judges that got rid of the state-run juvenile detention facilities in Pennsylvania and turned them over to private juvenile detention facilities from which they profited. He let them off. Well, what do you think?
Yeah, there's no excuse for that. We talked about pardoning Hunter. I tried to put as much of a positive spin as you could possibly imagine if there was anything he could do with that. Commuting people that are just downright evil, there's nothing that can be said with that. That is just a very, very poor decision, but it's even worse than a poor decision. It's actually a nefarious decision. I mean, it was deliberate, and I think he did it in your face, because here's what I believe their position is. They want to do everything they can to create as much havoc and destruction on this country before they're forced out of the door at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
I don't think there's any question that you are right over the target. I would analyze it a little further. This is my belief without evidence, but looking at all the circumstantial evidence and what I believe is about to be coming, I have this suspicion that all the commutations were designed to, one, take the discussion off of Hunter Biden and put it on the 1,500 people whose sentences he commuted or reduced. I mean, he took people off death row. They're still in prison and for life, but he usurped the authority of the sentencing judge or jury, and in effect took the power away from them and usurped it himself, taking them off the federal death row list. But I'm personally, I agree with you that there is massive amounts of evil within the Biden White House. And I'm sorry to say that. I derive no pleasure in saying that, but that's what we've watched for 4 years. I don't know any other conclusion that you could draw, but I think that these commutations in particular are designed to take our eye off the ball, number one, and number two, start to condition the American people for what is coming. And I predict, and have predicted it on this program, and will continue to do so until proven wrong, and we'll know. We'll know in just in a matter of 3 weeks. I think it's to condition us, and that on January the 19th, somewhere between the hour of 10 and 12 midnight, we will see a unprecedented list of people who get preemptively pardoned for crimes that they committed. Mayorkas, Garland, Jim Biden, Liz Cheney, Schiff,
Correct.
Benny Thompson, Swalwell, Kinzinger. I just think that we're about to see the abuse of the pardon like we've never seen it before. Now, am I just fanatical, old senile conspiratorialist, or what do you think?
No, John, you're right on cue. All my contacts there on the Hill and in the administration are all telling me those pardons are already being prepared. They're already in place. Here's what it does. You say, so I have people ask me, what's the next step? What are you going to do about it? It poses 2 very significant points that we can take advantage of, John. First of all, you can't just sit back and pardon somebody for something they haven't even been tried or convicted for. And that is an abuse of the presidential pardon provision. So I think the Supreme Court's going to have to weigh in here. But even more importantly than that, I've been saying this all along, John, I think it shows the necessity, and I've discussed this with President Trump, is that we have to look at military tribunals because they're outside of that. And quite frankly, I think the only thing to restore integrity to this country is to call in military tribunals. It can only be done for matters of national security. You can't call a military tribunal because it's a nasty divorce case, et cetera, et cetera. You can only call a military tribunal for matters of national security. Well, John, I can't think of anything greater national security wise than what we have seen. Let's take J6. If you cannot produce fair elections in this country and you don't have the right to analyze and to investigate whether they are fair or not, you don't have national security. Because if you can't guarantee that an election is fair and equitable, then there is no national security to begin with. You don't have a country to begin with. So I think that qualifies as our national security. I think when you talk about the issues of the pardoning with Hunter and others, those pardons were given to keep you off of the main target, and that is Joe selling the office of the presidency and the office of the vice presidency to the highest bidder.
Bingo.
Of course, being communist China.
Bingo
I mean, Ukraine
has
and others.
been called. You are,
and that's exactly what it is. And they're scared. Well, what do we do about it? Quit being scared. Just go ahead and call the military tribunal, because the military tribunal does not operate the way our normal jurisprudence does. Military tribunals are held by, they've got 60 days to complete the case, not to hear it, to complete it. They've already been assigned to junior grade officers. They are moved very quickly. They're allowed to bring in whatever evidence that they need. If it's not all there, they have military investigators that can do that. And then, of course, hey, we are fair. We let the other side present its full case. They hear it. They decide what to do with it. They look at it and say, was there a violation of the law? If there was a violation of the law, they immediately not only give their findings, they impose a sentence and carry it out based on whatever that sentence is. That's what we need to have done right now. Military tribunals are going to be necessary if we're going to restore integrity to this country.
well, I'm not sure you'd agree with me, but I have a tremendous amount of empathy and feel very sorry for Hunter Biden. I was blessed with a dad that if I lied or if I took a nickel out of his drawer, I would get my ass kicked. I would go to the woodshed. And he taught me right from wrong. Hunter Biden's father, on the other hand, taught him how to be a crook and how to take money from our adversaries and funnel it into 20 LLCs, which comprises the Biden crime family. And depending on whether you listen to Jamie Comer or Marsha Blackburn, the amount of money is somewhere between $30 and $60 million. I suspect it's much greater than that. But
I think it's $100 million.
And I think the money that they took was, as I said, not from our allies or people that were trying to just buy influence. I think the money was from our adversaries. As you said, China and Russia. We know that a Russia oligarch gave Hunter Biden a Porsche, diamonds, and I think a significant amount of cash, into the millions. And to me, at some point, when you watch the spy balloon that we tracked all the way from China into Canada, and then it swooped down and hovered over our most sensitive nuclear facilities in Montana and in the plains, and then made its way over to the Atlantic Ocean, right by where you live. We shoot it down after the mission is complete, and he wants to say what a bold and a courageous leader he is. I think he is a corrupt and probably treasonous leader. And so if you want to convene a military tribunal, I am okay with that. I say we start with the head of the snake and we go straight to Joe Biden and maybe bring his pal Obama with him, because you know, Kash Patel, Pam Bondi, they've got to start bringing people in, putting them under oath, and getting them to talk. And I think that this house of cards is going to collapse in a nanosecond when people start looking at orange jumpsuits.
Oh, I would agree with you, John. I think one of their biggest fears is a military tribunal, because you remember there's not the appeals and appeals and appeals for the next 50 years. Military tribunals are completed within 60 days. Their sentence is carried out before the end of the 60 days. So quite frankly, and it's very objective. Here's the evidence. Remember what a military tribunal is only concerned about. They're not concerned about what's your title, your wealth, etc. Did you break the law and did it compromise national security? That's all they want to know. If it did, here's the punishment. Here's the cause for it. If it didn't, you let go. You get back into society. But I'm very convinced, John, that when they get started on this, it's going to be unplugging a huge bathtub of sludge that's just going to just create a bigger and bigger funnel. You're going to see all kind of people coming down. because of it. That's why it's important to do a military tribunal. I don't think we have the backbone in our jurisprudence system or our court system to handle this kind of situation.
Do you think the country can handle the amount and overwhelming information that would potentially be unleashed on us, going back to JFK's assassination, Robert F. Kennedy's assassination, Martin Luther King's assassination, the Michael Epstein files, the January 6th fake, phony commission? I mean, there is a lot there that needs to be unpacked. Do the American people have the resolve and the ability to receive that amount of really horrendous information?
Well, we've had these discussions, and quite frankly, there are some who vehemently disagree with me. It's time to just close the door, move forward in a new positive direction. The problem with that logic, John, is this. We have a major issue in this country of accountability. Nobody's accountable for anything anymore. In fact, I'm all across the country, John, and when we talk about what you and I are talking about right now, the first reaction I get from the public is, that's great, but even if you give all the evidence in the world, nothing's going to happen to them. And if we get so cynical that we don't believe in the power of the law, we will ultimately collapse into anarchy because nobody will respect it. So this is what I have told transition team members and the president. If we don't restore accountability in this country, I feel bad for some people may get hit harder than others. And some of them, maybe they should get some mercy. That's not up to me. They have to be held accountable for their actions, first and foremost. I don't care who they are or what they are or what party, what affiliation. I don't really care what they did. If it compromised national security, they have to be held accountable. That's the first and foremost thing that this country is lacking, and that's what we're aimed to restore.
Michael, I don't know whether you've been listening to The Truth with John Gordon on the John Frederickson Radio Network every Saturday for the last several months, but I have said every Saturday, every week, every podcast that we don't want retribution. We're not
Correct.
trying to even a score. We demand accountability, that the rule of law, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights have to be honored, protected, and followed. That's all I care about. And then let the chips fall where they may. And if we want to prosecute these people, get the truth out, allow them to do a mea culpa, get confessions where appropriate and where they're volunteered. And then if Trump wants to pardon them, I'd be fine with it in the name of healing our country's wounds, but never again. And, I was home from the fourth grade. Our listeners are tired of hearing me talk about it. When I was in the fourth grade on November 22nd, 1963, I saw President Kennedy's assassination play out on television. I saw Oswald get shot on national television. I saw the horse-drawn carriage being taken to Arlington Cemetery. I saw John Kennedy go to the rotunda and lift the flag to try and find his dad. It left a scar on me. It left a wound, and I think that it did on the rest of the country. That wound needs to be healed. The only way that I know to heal it is to put sunshine on it and get the truth out. Let people know that Allen Dulles and the CIA killed Kennedy and Hoover and Johnson, covered it up, and ripped their names off the buildings and the street signs that have honored them because they do not deserve it. They killed and covered up the killing and the murder of the most popular president of our lifetime, at least until Donald Trump. There needs to be a day of reckoning. And I don't think we'll ever regain the moral authority to lead the world until we have that kind of a cleansing in America. And I want to join hands with you, Michael, and work to allow that to happen.
I think we have to, John. And here's where you'd asked a very pertinent question earlier. Can the American public absorb it?
Yeah.
And quite frankly, there's going to be a lot of uproar because what you said is just a tip of the iceberg. Let's talk about how we have used federal agencies for the sole purpose of child sex trafficking and killed and destroyed hundreds of thousands of kids knowingly to benefit a particular program within our federal government. Let's talk about some of our federal intelligence agencies that have used drug trafficking to create their own rogue accounts so that they can do whatever they want to do. Let's talk about how we have hurt and destroyed countries all across the country on a whim because of the fact that it made money for this country in its military operations. That needs to be explored. I realize people are going to be so sick. We're going to have a lot of Pepto-Bismol when we start this process. People are going to be nauseated for a while. But the only way to heal is you must drain the infection first. And I believe that if the American public is not sure if they can handle it, they're just going to have to grow up and learn how to, because we have to expose it, or otherwise it will continue to happen over and over again.
There is no question. And even before all of the bad things that have happened in this country over the last 3 years came out, I have been saying that we have to expose the truth, because, Reagan had trickle-down economics. I think that what we see now are trickle-down ethics. And
Correct.
Every bureaucrat in America, on all levels of government, have watched what has happened. They're not stupid. And they realize that if the members of the federal government could literally get away with murder, they can get away with lying, cheating, and stealing, and breaking the laws that they've sworn an oath to enforce. And I'm perfectly aligned with what you just said. Until there is a cleansing of America, we'll never regain our moral fortitude. Now, you talked about something that has been really on my radar of late. And, I watch this stuff pretty carefully. People are whispering, for the most part, about child trafficking. But the whispers have become so numerous that it is becoming, rising above the level of a whisper, and is starting to gain attention. Tell us about child trafficking. How deep, wide, and serious do you think the problem is? And I ask that question because there are a lot of bad things that people can do in this world, and we surely see them every day. To me, a crime against a child is the most despicable act that anyone can commit. I think the penalty should be death. But we digress. Tell us what information you have about how far and wide this runs.
You're right on key, John. This is a stain on the national conscience of this country.
Yeah.
That if we don't purge, will never allow us to move forward. This stain is so bad. It's not just a matter of in the past, there's child sex trafficking. Just don't tell me when it's going to go on, and I'll make sure I don't look that way, and we'll leave it that way. We have gone now to the point where agencies help and participate in making sure that the objective is accomplished. And that is what is so disgusting. We have used the power of the federal government to help traffic children. And that is what needs to be exposed. Everyone who's been involved needs to be exposed. I don't care if you didn't do it yourself, but you knew it was going on and refused to sound the alarm. Every single person involved with committing these hideous crimes on our children. Why am I so infuriated by this? John, we're not just talking about sexualizing kids. We're talking about torturing them. We're talking about murdering them. We're talking about doing things that are just, you can't even describe on the air. And we've sat back and allowed not only for that to occur under our watch, but have become involved with it in the federal government. We're profiting off of it. How do you expect this country to ever have any kind of moral decency when we allow that kind of a stain to continue? God certainly could never bless a country that does not, knowing it's there, that does not deal with that issue and deal with it very forcefully. One of the things I'm grateful for with Tom, when we talk about immigration issues, the illegal deportation, Tom and I are committed to one thing. Not only are the cartels going, the terrorists going, the villains going from all across the world that have been brought here, but one of our key aspects, we're going to find these 500,000 children that are missing, 500,000 children. Many of them probably already dead, but we're going to find what's left of them. We're going to rescue them, and we're going to deal with the people very forcefully that have caused this stain on our country.
Just as you have brought us through this, you have led me through the 3 stages of grieving. You shocked me out of I've not been in denial, but it's so painful. It's even hard to look. But so you've shocked us out of our denial. I have a tremendous lump in my throat that I've developed while listening to you. This is sad beyond belief that leaders in our country, officials in our government could look the other way at best, profit at worst, and not do anything about this. And now you've just left me mad as hell. What are we going to do, and how do we push back against this sheer evil?
I can tell you this, we're getting death threats left and right. And quite frankly, I say bring it on, because look here, your gang's not as big as ours. We're going to be involving, the president's already committed to involving special forces on this as well. And we're going to make sure, loud and clear, let the message be heard. We know who you are. You won't escape. We're coming for you. And I promise you that we will get you. And the only question you're going to have in your mind is, are you going home in shackles or in a body bag? And quite frankly, we don't care which one you want to choose. I prefer you go home in the body bag myself. It's a little cheaper, a little easier to handle. But we're going to see what transpires. You're going to see some major changes in this country, major things happening in the next 60 to 90 days.
I think the American people have got to sign up for it. I think they've got to say, go get them, sick them. And just let the chips.
They have, John.
I think so too. On November the 5th, I think they sent a very loud and clear message. I want to know what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania. I don't know whether you know the name Maxwell Urich or not, but Maxwell Urich drove a white van to Butler, Pennsylvania from Mesa, Arizona. His father owns Urich Ammunitions. And the van was towed on national television shortly after the attempt, and it was reported that it contained explosives. The day after the assassination, Maxwell Urich's parents filed a missing persons report on him. He has not been seen or heard of since then, and he had a scar on his ear from having worn gauges. Matthew Thomas Crooks had no such scar. If you zoom in on the person on that AGR building, it appears that they have a scar on their ear. I'm not sure that it's not Maxwell Urich. Do you have any information, or do you know anything about what I'm talking about?
You're definitely headed in the right direction. Here's what I can say now, because I still deal with the intelligence agencies. Here's what I can tell you now, John. And this goes back to your assertion: are the American public able to handle this? Of course, my initial response is they're going to be sick, but I don't care if they can handle it or not. They need to know it, period. The truth needs to come out, regardless of whether you can handle it or not. And the truth, what they're going to find out is that our government has been involved with not only wrongful prosecution, they don't like you. They're not above taking you out and using government assets to do so. They say, are you trying to imply that some of these assassination tips, quite frankly, with all my information that I've had, John, there's no way you could have done it without government assistance. They have patsies. They have plenty of people that they lined up. I mean.
Are you talking about Butler specifically now?
Yes, I'm talking about Butler specifically.
I'm right there with you. I mean,
but not just Butler. We're talking about what happened in Mar-a-Lago. All the assassinations, there have been a number of assassination attempts that have been unreported. All of them are in the same vein and venue. They find people that are patsies. They use them as assets for a while. They train them, and then they use them to do their nefarious activities. You can't get that. You can't get that done, John, without having inside information. How do you think you get that close to the president without having some insider information, knowing what time, where, when, and being able to get by without being nailed? Because any other way, any other purpose, that you would have nailed before you even got near the place.
I've heard a lot of people speculate about that. As you and I were talking about before we went on the air, I live right across from Mar-a-Lago. I know when the president's coming and going. It is not hard to discern that. So I'm not as concerned about how did they know, how did the Roth know that President Trump was going to be at that golf course that day? Anybody that lives around here knows when he's coming and going. And it's Sunday, it's a beautiful day, probably going to play golf. Here's the thing that gets me. I am not trained in protecting valuable assets. I have zero knowledge about how you go about doing that, but I do have common sense and I'm reasonably smart. And we went to the press conference. We were there an hour after the attempted assassination occurred. And then I spent the next 3 hours walking around the entire golf course and looking for witnesses, actually, of which I didn't find any. I was looking for that guy that supposedly told the police, gave him a description of the car and the person that jumped in it. I was trying to find him. I still haven't been able to find him. And I've read no reports on who it was. Doesn't matter. I digress. But my point is that I was there. And I looked at that golf course. And I played that golf course before. And on Congress, the golf course runs parallel to Congress. And then it turns and runs parallel to Summit, which is the front of the Trump International. And then I see the motorcade. There are 50 motorcycle policemen from Palm Beach Sheriff, City of Palm Beach, Broward County, Florida State Patrol. It is a spectacle.
Correct.
And I'm saying, well, isn't that great? They're really protecting our president. But then you go out to the venue where Ralph tried to assassinate President Trump. A 4-year-old could have figured out that if you had put a cop on the corner of Summit and Congress, one on the north end of Congress and one on the west end of Summit, and they each had binoculars, you would have entirely protected that perimeter, and Ralph would never have been allowed to go into those bushes. What the hell is going on?
How did Ralph get there? Because he was on, you remember he had dealings with Ukraine.
Yes.
He was on national security's radar screen, okay?
Yes. Arrested 100 times. And it's believed that he had ties to the CIA. And guess who else who he knew in the Ukraine?
Zelensky.
Maxwell Urich.
Aha. So that's new. I didn't know that.
Yeah. I've read it on multiple accounts. So is that true? I don't know. Is there a lot of smoke? And did Director Cheadle act like someone trying to cover up? And did Ronald Rutrow act like somebody who was arrogant, rude, and disrespectful to a sitting congressman of the United States and pivoting and trying to talk about 9/11 when they were there to talk about Butler and West Palm Beach? They act guilty as hell to me, at least of trying to cover something up. I want the truth.
And then, John, we now understand that shots were fired by the agent. He was a matter of feet away from the assumed assailant. You're going to tell me he couldn't hit a target that close with that many shots that were fired?
I've read that. I just don't have enough information to have drawn a conclusion. The original reports said that he was several dozens of yards away and saw the weapon and then started firing. I don't know. The fact is, I think that if they were trying to let the guy get away, they would have allowed him to fire his shots like they did in Butler and then have taken him out. It's just laughable. If you go back and you watch that video, there's nothing funny about it. Don't misunderstand where I'm coming from. But it's laughable to think that the counter sniper who had, whether it was Crooks or Urich or somebody else, in his sights before he ever took the sniper's position, allowed him to fire 8 rounds of ammunition and then shot him. Come on, give me a break.
It's amazing. I've listened to the transcript. I've looked at the evidence. The fact that he called out, there's I have a bead on the assailant, permission to fire, and nobody got back to him. And allow those shots to be rung out against the president before anybody responded. I mean, that's my point, John. You can't do all this kind of stuff without having insider help. Nobody's that lucky.
Trump doesn't hold back. I believe that he levels with the American people on most topics. Why has he not spoken about this? He doesn't really talk about it. And I can tell you, if somebody took a shot at me, I'd be mad as hell, and I'd be wanting to try and figure out who it was and make sure that they paid the price.
He's got it in put it this way, it's on the list. He's being careful what needs to be said until we have full control. But trust me, it's on the list, and they know it. And they know that not vengeance, but accountability is coming. And I think that's the key to what you said, John, whether it's this issue on the presidential security, whether it is the fact that we've allowed our intelligence agencies to profit from obvious nefarious activities, to do unspeakable things on behalf of industries in America, to topple foreign governments. All that has got to come out. I realize that I hear the push, the flip side. That can never come out. It'll destroy our relationships with foreign countries. We have to just move on. I'm sorry, but we can't move on without full reckoning and full accountability. And I think the best way it helps us with foreign relations is to say, look, this happened. We're making sure it never happens again. This is what happened. It affected your country. We're going to issue a formal apology for doing so. It's all we can do. No, we're not going to go in there and rebuild your country for you, but we're going to go on ahead and issue a formal apology. We all make mistakes. We've held these people accountable. They're going to pay the price. They're going to suffer a consequence for it. Now we move on.
Michael Letts, it has been such a pleasure speaking to you, and I'm so honored to have gotten to meet you, and I hope it's the beginning of a long-term friendship. You and I are perfectly aligned on every single issue that we've talked about. You see it the way I see it. And, as I said earlier, none of this makes me happy. I don't derive any joy at all from talking about any of this, except it's got to be done. It's time. And I think that God is on our side. I really do. I think that Trump is the chosen one. And you look at all the bullets that he's dodged, real and metaphorically. It's the only intellectual answer I can come up with. And so
I think he knows that, John. And I think that's why this time around, he's being very precise and very poignant to make sure that we get the job done this time. The last time you listened to the establishment, the rhinos, and look what happened. This time he knows better than to listen to them. He knows that if we're going to get change, it has to come from the outside, not from within. That's what he's doing. And we are committed to making change. We're going to hit it with both fists and give it everything we've got, John.
Well, I'd like to make a deal with you. I'd like you to become a regular on The Truth with John Gordon and come back.
Love to.
And let's keep this dialogue going. We haven't even talked about Liz Cheney and the January 6th Commission and the two bombs that were planted, one at the DNC and the RNC, that nobody wants to talk about anymore. And Liz Cheney said, she's being protected by people that have protected her family for 2 decades. Sounds a lot like Director Cheadle to me. There's a lot of smoke there that needs to be ferreted out, and I hope you'll come back and help us figure it out. Michael Letts, Happy New Year. And where do our listeners find you and learn more about you?
If they go to our website, that's www.investusa.org. It's a charity.org. You can find out everything we're doing, how to take care and protect our first responders. And because you realize, John, we're fixing to go in about another 30 days, put our people in harm's way to make sure we deal with these drug cartels, child sex traffickers, et cetera. They need to make sure they're protected. Right now, they don't have the necessary active shooter vests to be able to protect themselves. Unfortunately, the cartels are much better off than they are. So let's try to do what we can here at Christmas time. You can make a donation. Please do so.
We've told you the truth today. Don't be mad at the messenger. We've got a lot of truth that we're going to have to uncover over the next several months. We're going to get this country back on the right track. Michael Letts is going to help do it. And that's the truth.